Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Overcoming the Podcast. I am your host, Taylor, founder and face of Survivors Overcoming Silence, trauma survivor myself, doctor of occupational therapy, which is where you hear the SOS with Dr. Taylor. And I am here today bringing you back into season 4 of the podcast. If you saw our last episode, we talked a little bit about everything that happened in my life and had some deeper dive discussions on the Overcoming Podcast Instagram page of what that all entailed. I took a poll from the community and asked which one of these topics would you want to dive into next? And it was astounding majority of me dating a hidden child sexual predator. That is one of those that is an uncomfy one for me. However, it is something that, as many of you in the comments have been reassuring me and my therapist has been supporting me with, it is not my responsibility and the shame is not mine to hold. I do have some shame and wish I would have seen more or seen more clearly. It's one of those situations of if I wasn't so triggered and if I was my best self, I would have caught this much sooner. And I would have done better for myself sooner. I feel like that's kind of where my thing is. And I know you feel like, as my therapist likes to say, is like you should yourself to death. Like you should have done this. You would have done this. This could have happened. And I think that it's really important we reflect on these situations that there is no blaming the victim. And in this case, I wasn't even necessarily the victim. Like, he didn't abuse me. He didn't abuse anyone I knew. We were dating. And then afterwards, I realized that he was a liar and there was a big mask. And I just had a really big gut feeling as to something else that was happening. But in that, there are a lot of signs that looking back, I saw. And I wish I knew better. And was able to discern what that was. And so this episode, while I'm going to be telling the story of, let's call him Jack, is really going to be talking about some of the covert signs that me, as a complex trauma survivor who has been victim to multiple different men and has been around scary men whose mannerisms and all of these things were normalized, is that I really want those kind of things to come through to anyone who is listening. And they're so covert, and some of these predators are so intelligent that they know just how to twist the truth. They know just how to get the buy-in. They know just enough how to mirror you. It's a skill, and it's a terrifying skill, but it's a skill. And as someone who grew up being raised by an overt narcissist who had that skill of manipulation with everyone else and had cops believing them and like all kinds of things, like, I really thought that I knew the things. I really thought that I got it. I really thought that I knew how to protect myself because I am the one who shares about these signs. I am the one who shares about all of these red flags, right? But the reality is, this one was next level, and I got. But as you will see as I unravel this story more, he underestimated how smart I was and how intuitive I was and how willing I was to do the right thing, regardless of intimidation. He deeply underestimated me, and it's actually really funny, if you can find the humor in this. I met him on the day of a very big karmic transit, and that karmic transit closed out the last day that I saw him a year later. It's a little wild. And there are some things, about this story I will tell you that if you're not cool with the woo-woo, you may be a little bit like, about, but I'm only sharing this part of things to share kind of how it came to be of me discovering this, because I think that is extremely interesting. And it plays a really big part in getting to unravel the predator and understanding how deeply protected I was and how safe and supported I was in spite of having a romantic and intimate relationship with a hidden child sexual predator who lied about their entire identity. And as luck would have it, they actually have my birthday. And that's still, and you can see it on my face like instantly. It's just, ugh. Anyways, so let's get into it. Okay, so when I first met Jack, I went on to the online dating sites. Okay. And at first I feel like it'd probably been a few days. I am notoriously someone who does not like online dating. I find it to be impersonable. I find that men have more ability to be crude and they're at a distance and they have the guts. Um, and again, it's not that I am not like a sensual or sexual person as an adult woman. It's just also like, hi, I'm a human. Like, that's great. I'm hot as heck, but could you also like, I'm a human and I'm looking for something long term. I'm not just looking for a hookup, right? And again, some of the things that these men would say are just like vulgar or yeah. And so I was coming out of a history of relationships where the men that I dated ended up being intimidated by me. And it started off as like, ooh, I appreciate you and I look up to you and it's amazing all these things you can do and wow. And it may have started off as like someone who was like, I'm there for you, you poor little thing, right? Because like the men that I dated and the men that I kind of like connected with was a lot was when like started when I was in my very, very wounded teen years. Okay. So I had just come out of a relationship a year prior to meeting this guy where I was in a very long-term relationship and this guy had been infatuated with me for a very long time. Like I wouldn't even say infatuated. This dude was in love with me. Was a very good friend of mine and I always pushed him away and I friend zoned him, right? I was like, nah, no, eh. And then I did some work as an adult and I realized that part of the reason that I friend zoned him was because he was being nice to me. And in my subconscious beliefs, someone being that nice to me wanted something from me and they were manipulating me. And again, there was nothing super conscious, but like even though we were good friends and like I've even referred to him as a best friend before, I kept him removed from my initial group. Like there'd be my everyday people, and then there would be him. And it looking back, that's really telling. But he also was my call when the assault happened as an adult. And if you were new to me, when I was 22, I was sexually assaulted by a father figure. My last name is a fake family that I have essentially like I was partially raised by. I was my mom's best friend from high school. My grandfather, again, no bio relation, right before he died, said that I should just take his last name and be a Millsap because I basically already was, right? And this family I felt like was like the bridge between both the maternal and paternal side who each had their issues. Neither one of them wanted to see it in each other. And so I felt very validated and supported and seen. And they were willing to say, yeah, there's dysfunction on both sides. We see you. Come over here. This is your safe haven, right? Well, there was an adult male who married into that family, does not share the same last name that I have. If they did, I would absolutely change it. I just don't want to go through the whole process. But there was that male who married into the family, and I didn't have a lot of contact with him until I was probably like a teen. Again, wounded teen. And I developed a relationship with him as an uncle. But like the more dysfunctional that my biological father became, the more that I would just be like, oh, I have my uncle. I have my uncle, right? Anyways, and so from that point forward, I really like I kind of saw him as more of like that father figure, called him on Father's Day, all of those things. Long story short, there was a whole thing that happened where I was away with him, thinking I was just, hanging out with my dad in the woods, going on a camping trip. Yeah. Woke up and I was being assaulted and I ended up reporting it, lost the whole family, and justice was not served. And this justice scenario, where there was a recorded confession and all of these things, this plays into this story. And I think that's part of the reason why I got by this predator, because he used this. and again, this will loop back in a minute. So anyways, 22, I was sexually assaulted by an adult. Bio dad was primary abuser, and also just like extremely disturbed, and obsessed with me. And I was also the number one target and the scapegoat and all of these things. And bio dad was also a narcissist. And really good at lying, right? Really good at lying, gaslighting, psychological abuse, all of that. Like that's that confusion, all of that led me away from my sense of self. That shaped so much of who I was. And I kind of had this idea after I got out of the relationship with the guy that I dated, was a high school friend. He always felt safe to me, until he wasn't. It was like the accountability shift. It went from, I admire you, I support you, I'm the one who's there for you, I'm the one who helps you pick up the pieces, to when the accountability needed to shift to, hey, you're doing some things that are not okay. Hey, like you have your own work to do. I'm actually doing really well right now. If you want to be in a relationship with me, this is what needs to happen, because these behaviors are just not healthy and not okay. And I wouldn't tolerate this from anyone else, but I know you and I know this isn't you, so I'm willing to stick around longer. And, I justified a little bit of that in there. And so basically, I came from someone who would mock my spirituality, said they supported things, but was just like, didn't. And it was very clear, was making fun of me. And then someone who would take these things that they learned about mental health and all this and like weaponize it against me. Someone who was very clearly jealous of the attention that I was getting, particularly the attention that I was getting from their family and the perception of their family, including their stepdad said that they're going to lose me and they should follow my own behavior and act differently. Because of an incident when we were at dinner when they were drinking. And just basically like was like, you need to be more like Taelor, which led to resentment that I don't even know if he realized. But anyways, he was far less ambitious, far less financially stable. Like I was taking care of everything, and that also led to complications. But it was just like, I came out of a relationship of being the one who had everything, someone who claimed to be emotionally intelligent, but was actually just like so running from themselves and did not have emotional intelligence, and instead was projections, and it actually turned to behaviors that were emotionally abusive, which is heartbreaking from the person that I knew to being in a relationship with him. But I wasn't always my best self either, and it was very much like an anxious avoidant attachment type of relationship. I was healing my wounds within that relationship, and by the end, it was definitely different. But the person that I was in the relationship was repeating these patterns essentially with themselves. And also substance abuse played into that relationship. So that's important context for this story. And that's the context that this person was given. And I have to be careful with being an open book, because sometimes predators can use that against you. And they don't look like predators. I've learned my lesson. So anyways, I met Jack. And I met Jack after I was coming out of a situation in my work, which I talked about briefly, and I don't really want to go into all the details, but essentially I was being groomed at work, and I was still in a contract that I couldn't get out of yet. And it was a husband and wife duo that I worked for, and the husband was the one who was creating issues for me and was very clearly telling the wife that I was coming on to him or something, because the wife was like icing me out. In the phone call that I mentioned to the last one of the things he said, it was like, oh, she's really mad at you, but like, don't even confront her, like it'll pass. Like it was just really uncomfortable. Again, for me doing the right thing and trying to speak up and be like, hi, I'm not a threat. So I was in this mindset of looking for this relationship of, I'm not a threat. And also, I kind of want to be in a relationship, right? Like, why not be in love? Like, okay, that sounds great. Like, it's been almost a year since I, got out of this really long-term relationship. Like, I can handle this. Like, I am really comfortable with where I'm at and moving forward. And I feel more stable. And okay, let's do this. So I jumped into online dating, and I made a profile, and pretty much my profile was like, I'm very big into self-development, and I'm really chill with, most things, but I'm, my soul is set on fire when I'm passionate about something, essentially, just like alluding to the fact that I'm very big in self-development. Okay. Which I feel like is key for, again, this story. There's so many things that are key. Okay, Taylor, just tell the dang story. So I ended up, a couple of went on dates with a couple of the dudes. Nothing really panned out, whatever. Conversations weren't flowing. And then this guy comes up and we connected. And right after, he was like, "Hey, can I call you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it ended up being the next morning. I was like, we texted, I feel like a little bit back and forth, maybe a day or two, maybe on the app. And then he was like, "I would like to call you. Is that okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I remember that Jack's opening line was, "Are you real?" And I was like, yeah, yeah, I'm real." And he was like, "Okay, okay, just making sure." I'm like, "What?" And that was a little confusing, but I was like, "Oh, whatever." And then he like played it off to be like, because you're just like he's like, "You're pretty much," he literally was like, "You're like a goddess amongst mortals." And I was like, "Okay, like nerdy, kind of whatever, like a little bit like souffleurs, whatever. Okay, cool." Um, So I was like, "I'll give this guy a chance." Like, like who knows? He on his profile, he says that he's 31. He wanted to go to like a place with tacos and asked me about all my dietary stuff, whatever. And this I went wrong on a lot of ways in this relationship. Okay, I'm gonna share right now that some of these things is gonna make me cringe, but it's what happened. And I think it's important to share. So we ended up meeting up. And I yeah. So first, before we met up, we talked on the phone, and he basically was like, "I'm not intimidated by your doctorate at all." Like one of the things I was like, "You can't be intimidated by me, man. Like I'm coming." I'm like, "You can't. Like that's just something that just like you can't. You need to be like really support what I do." And the fact that I am ambitious and the fact that I do have kind of a public image, like I'm not telling you necessarily what things are, but like you have to be supportive of that. And he was like, "Yeah," he's like, "Actually, it's really amazing. And I have a master's and I wanted to go back to my doctorate, but I didn't because of this reason." And he was like, "Blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "I actually am writing a book." And like, he's like, "I would love to speak on stages and all of these things." And I was like, "Wow, high alignment." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's meet." So we agreed to message a little bit. It wasn't too much time. And then we ended up going out for tacos in Scottsdale, Arizona. And which I notoriously call Snobsdale. It was the snobbiest place ever. But it was what it is. I was living in Phoenix at the time, so he ended up not being very far from me. And I drove out there, and yeah, so I met him. And then on the first date, he was just so interested in me. Like, so interested in me. But it felt like a very much like a wow. Like he was just like amazed that I was who I was. Like it was just like I'm just so intrigued. And I found myself trauma dumping. I really did. I was trauma dumping and I was like, "Yeah, there's just like some stuff and like whatever and all of this, right?" And yeah, I don't know. Like there was some just like flirty talk of like cuddling or whatever before we met up and I was like, "It's fine." Like it was nothing like vulgar or anything. So yeah, I was just like literally, and he was just like, "Wow, like I'm so amazed by you." And he's just like, I've been through my own fair share of things, and for you to be where you are, and it's just like it's really amazing. Started talking about how he loves Brene Brown and he loves his therapist, and therapy is so essential to everything in life and for everyone, regardless of what's happened, and just all of these things. And I was like, "Wow, look at you, enlightened man." Talking about how, he dealt with some hard things and he's growing to be more spiritual. And I was like, "Okay, he's open to the woo woo." Like, and at this point, I'm just like, okay, all right, potential, right? And I was like, "All right." And again, remember, I was like, there was like a predatory situation at work, and I wanted to be like, "Hi, I'm not a threat." So I was like, this guy has some real potential. Okay, cool. Then again, I was very triggered and went out and he like walked me out and I kind of sat there for a while, just talking. And then he leaned in and he kissed me. And it was like an intense, like, it wasn't just like a first date, mwah. It was like a holy, like, old school 1920s, I'm gonna embrace you, right? And I was like, "Oh, okay." That was okay. And I ended up going back to his place. Okay. He was like, "It's just nearby, like whatever." And I was like, "Well, we've been talking, like I actually see something with him, like it's not a big deal, whatever." And we started off just like talking about like, oh yeah, we're gonna cuddle, whatever. I ended up sleeping with him. And when I slept with him, out of body, I actually said, I love you. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah. And luckily for both of us, we both ignored that. I was like, that just came that whoa, like, okay, no. Um, and then he was just like, I would like to see you again. He's like, you're really impressive, like all whatever. And like we just had like a very fast but very good and extreme chemistry first day. But it wasn't just like a physical thing. It was also like an emotional and a mental and a like all these things seem aligned and like all of this, right? So I'm not at this point, I'm not really checking into my intuition. I'm just listening to feelings and I'm just like, boom, right? And I'm like, this guy, it's just basically like he is the exact opposite of what I came from. What a refreshing relief. This is what I deserve, right? Like that's kind of where my mindset was like, this man could take care of me. He was telling me that he was an architect. And I was like, oh, at first I was like, oh, the buildings. He's like, no, I'm a tech architect. And he told me all about what that was. And he travels for work and he loves to travel and all these things that I want to be doing. And I was just like, wow, this man is something special. He's smart. He's well read. He's therapied. Like, wow. And we started hanging out every day. And one of the things I mentioned on the date, um, is that, love to travel. And he was like, I would love to take you somewhere. I was like, no rush. He's like, but honestly, he's like, I would love to go to Sedona. I was like, yeah, I would love to go to Sedona. That just sounds great, right? Because I was wanting to go to Sedona and I was like, I don't really want to. And at the time, I wasn't making as much money as I do now. Like I was definitely in a more unstable point of my life where I was like in transition. I felt more stable than I was when I was in that relationship. But I also was taking a risk on like putting SOS first. And I was prepping to launch the first ever online course, like the big online course. It was hours and hours and hours, um, that I was going to be launching in the middle of this relationship because I have a habit of doing things in relationships as business stuff moves forward. And I almost have to like pick and learn how to balance. And it's like really hard to do. But anyways, so I that was all kind of going on too. And I was like, yeah, I want to, but I kind of got to do this. And he was like, whatever. I talked to my roommate and I was like, I have this really good connection with this guy. Like he's smart and he's funny and he's therapied and he's just like, I don't know. And I was like, I really think that like, and then I ended up texting him either a day or two after. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take you up on that Sedona thing. I say, let's just do it. And so I'm like, I'm going to be safe. And I was like, and I was like, am I just crazy? Do I go? And she was like, take a risk. She's like, if you're, like just like, she's like, be safe, share all of your stuff. But she's like, take a risk. And he came over and we had a magical weekend in Sedona. And this solidified it for me. I was like, okay. And looking back, it was so fast. Like it was probably like a week and a half after I met him. And we went on a big trip together. High red flag. But I was like, this is romantic. He wants to sweep me off my feet. My last relationship never took me on a date. This guy wants to take me on a trip. Oh my gosh. And it's like, we're not flying. It'll be fine. And whatever. And I was like, and like, he'll get to the point where he either like sees my spiritual side or not. And like, he'll either like run for the hills or he'll just accept it. Anyway, so we end up going up to Sedona. And there were a couple weird things that happened. That I look back now and I was like, okay. Before we went up to Sedona, he told me, he's like, yeah, I've never been there before. And I was like, really? Wow, yeah, we should totally go. He's like, I've always wanted to go and it's so close. And I was like, yeah, we should go. And I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, I asked my coworkers about it. He's like, we got a couple of restaurants we can try and some cool things. And I was like, yeah, I'm up for it. Like, yeah. And I'm like, a man taking the lead, knows what he's doing, just taking me along for the ride. I love this. He's like, I'll pay for everything. Don't worry about it. I think I ended up getting the hotel and then he took care of everything else. So I was like, I don't want to be fully dependent on you. So anyway, so I found the hotel and it was this cute little inn and it had like these swings in the back and your own private suite. And it was just like no kids, no dogs, very calm, just like Zen vibes. Like they had like a little garden in the back and it was just like gorgeous and wonderful. And you could just like hang out by the fire pits. And it was just like, ah, oh, serenity. Okay. So we did this. And the drive up was fine. And then on the way over, we missed our exit to like merge off of the road. And he told me, he's like, I have something to tell you. And if I tell you, I'm afraid you're going to leave. And I was like, okay. And I'm also thinking of the power trip of this, right? Because we were in a car together going to Sedona. I am now like 2 hours away from home and no way to get back. Like I would have to call someone to get back or take an Uber ride, which would be extremely expensive. So on the way to Sedona, I told him about the situation with my uncle and how that justice situation. It was literally just like the car, and I'm pretty sure it's because I drove by that area of town and I had a slight panicky thing in the car. And I was like, I'm just going to disclose this because it's easier to disclose than not. And so I did. I told him about how the justice system failed me, and he just got angry. He was like, wow, I cannot believe that happened. Like, that's horrible. And he was like, I dealt with something similar. He's like, I don't really want to like worry, like dump this on you. He's just like, I'm just like so sorry. He's like, he's like, the justice system is just so messed up. He's like, you should have like had so much more support than that. And I was like, yeah, it really is. And he was like, I'm so sorry you dealt with that. I was like, thanks. And so there was, then I feel like it was probably about like 45 minutes to an hour after that in the drive where he was like, I need to tell you something. And then he told me what later I will find out to be as a lie. So he told me that the reason that he asked me if I was real on the dating apps is because he was trapped. He was set up by someone, and he was on dating apps and he went to go see this girl. And it turns out this girl was underage and he thought she was of age and said on her profile it was of age, but it was a trap and it was a setup, and they took him away in handcuffs and he gave his phone and was like, look at my social media, like I didn't do anything wrong, like here. And he went to jail. And I was like, oh, okay. And the fear, I mean, like we said, we ended up missing the exit. He ended up pulling over at this point. And it was like full body fear. And I was like, you can't fake that fear. And like energetically, I felt that. He was just like terrified. And I was like, wow, I am so sorry. And he was like, yeah. And he's like, I lost part of my life. And he was like, and I have kids that I can't see because of this that happened. He was like, and I didn't do anything wrong. And I've been trying to fight it. And people in the system told me that I was prosecuted wrong way. And like, this is why he's like, I got out early. And he's like, and I've been doing this. And he's like, and I'm writing a book all about it. And, and he's just like going on and on. And I'm like, wow. And he was like, and I want to tell my story. He's like, I'm a public, he's like, I'm going to be telling my story. I'm a public speaking. And like, that's all of these things. And he's like, it's just the injustice in these systems. They're so broken. He was like, and seeing what happened to you with the system and seeing what happened to me. And he's like, it just makes sense why we met. And I was like, yeah. And like, again, he was so terrified. And at this point, I really liked the guy, right? Like I told him I loved him the first night I met him. Well, and again, that was a knee-jerk reaction to something physical. But anyway, still, I definitely was like, I really like this guy. And so I was just like, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. Like, and he's like, if you need to leave, I understand. And I was like, no, I think we should just play out. And again, I recognize now the signs were there. And the way he spun it, he gave a little bit of truth and just enough to be like, it's not that bad. Shortly before we went on a date, also I should mention that I ran his information on background check. And Jack on his dating profile had a different name. And said, oh, that's just what my friends call me, but you can call me whatever you want, after I saw his ID. When we were dating, like I said, like it was by the bed, and I was like, oh, what's this? And he was like, oh, yeah. And like one of his degrees was sitting out as well. Like I think it was in English something or other, like a master's in something with English. And it was like the whole name, including the middle name. And I was like, oh, Okay. That's different than your profile. He's like, yeah, 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 yeah. And he's like, I just don't need everyone to look me up, you know? And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, that red flag. Like, only people who wouldn't want someone to look them up or someone who's hiding something, right? Like, look me up. I got nothing to hide. You know what I mean? So, again, I think I just really wanted to like this guy and I didn't want to see these as this is a really bad thing. So, anyways, he tells me this and he's like sobbing, okay? Like, sobbing. There is fear, like deep fear in a grown man's eyes. Like, you can see him reliving trauma, you can see it all. And I was like, wow. And he's like, my family is very similar to yours. He's like, I had a really broken family. He's like, my mom is absolutely a narcissist. He's like, I had to be the one to make a change. And unfortunately, the way the system is set up, like he's like, I'm pretty sure that I was set up by this vengeful person. Wow. Okay. And again, it's not that hard to believe considering my biological father has made up complete stories to get a false restraining order on me to then have control to say that like she did all these things. Like my biological father is so vengeful and malicious because they think I ruined their life. They like make up things to try and get me in trouble that I didn't do. So again, based on my context of having a narcissistic parent, that was not too out of the ordinary. Like that just made sense, okay? And also like I was getting no signs in his body language or anything of deception. Nothing. Nothing. And it felt like it brought us closer together. It really did. And I don't know why at that point that I was just like, I should look him up. I didn't do it. I didn't think about it. I was just like, wow, that vulnerability for him to share that with me. Wow, what a good guy. Wow, he's so much like me. And at that point, I was like, wow, maybe we're someone who's meant to change systems together. Maybe this is like a soulmate. Oh my gosh. Oh, goodness, Taylor. Okay, so like again, I guess that cringe. I know cringe, but I was in a very triggered state and I didn't realize I was in a very triggered state, but I was. I was just trying to make things fit. So we get to Sedona, have a wonderful time. When we get there, he's like, oh, I heard that there is this like castle that we can kind of go to, but we don't have to drive all the way up because I've heard it's like really busy. He's like, but we can just like, he's like, it's just like a weird, he's like, I looked up how to get it, whatever. And I forget what it's called in Sedona, but it's basically like the castle on the hill thing, chapel on the hill, maybe one of those. Anyways, but it's like one of those where you have to know where you're going and go through the winding roads to then find it, right? And he just navigates it like perfectly. I was like, you've never been here? He's like, never been here. And I was like, oh, okay. And so he like just takes a picture of it at the bottom of the hill. He's like, okay, cool, let's go. And I was like, okay. So we go and, you know, find the hotel, check in, do some shopping. We're in a crystal shop, and this is like my inner child is out, and I'm happy and I'm goofy. At the same time, he's just being his like charismatic, just like magnetic, like, ooh, like happy, including me and everything. Like, just, yeah. And I remember I'm pretty sure I was wearing my like yellow power pants. Um, and when we went into this crystal shop, and like I was filling up things, and I was like, "Ooh, you should look into this one. Ooh, you should look into this, right?" And I was just like, you know, total inner child is out like that. That is the date idea. If you want to get me, buy me crystals. They're pretty, and even if they don't have magical powers, they're really pretty. Okay. Anyways, so while we're in the store, one of the ladies who works there comes up to me, and she was like, "Wow, he's really into this. Like, you got yourself a keeper." And I was like, "Right." And then she also came up to me and she was like, I have an intuitive message for you if that's okay. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And she was like, your guides want you to say that like whatever you're doing, you're going to be really successful. Like you're going to be very well known and you're going to change things. And I was like, wow. And he was right next to me and he was like, babe. And I was like, yeah, thanks. That's really nice. And she was like, yeah. And she's like, and you guys are really good together. Like this energy is just great. And I was like, right. And so everyone was just like, again, making the connection of like what I felt was like, yeah, this energy, like we're really good together. And I'm like, if some extra woo-woo lady in Sedona is saying this who doesn't know me and doesn't know him, like, oh yeah, we're great together. Cool, check, right? And so we're just like hanging out in Sedona. And then there was another weird thing that happened. We went to the Mariposa, which is a beautiful restaurant. And again, he's like, never been here, never been here, never been here. But he seemed to know his way around. And he's like, oh, you should take a picture by this big door. I've heard about this. I've heard about this. I've heard about this. And I was like, okay. He's like, I've heard this is really good. My coworker said we should do this. And I was like, okay. Take pictures there, whatever. The reason that this is important in the Sedona story was because when I was uncovering things in one of the holes that I found right before we broke up, I scrolled all the way to the back of his Instagram. He had pictures of Sedona. He had pictures with an old girlfriend that he like recently, and the girlfriend was taking them on his Instagram. It could have been wife at this point. I don't know. Of the exact same angle of that little castle at the beginning, of very similar to the same hikes we went on. Just all of this, basically, this Sedona trip was in bits and pieces on very, very, very far back on his Instagram. And again, he told me, I've never been there. We should go together. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that was fun. We went up to the airport area and watched the sunset together and just like, oh my gosh, I was like, I am falling in love with this man. And it was just like deep conversations and we were just vibing and it was just like I was in my happy place and he was just like so happy. We went on a hike the day after and I'm pretty sure someone made a comment about something like us as a couple or something. Also of note, I looked good. Like I looked really good back then. I was fit. And it's not that I'm not now, but I was like in my prime, okay? I was hot, hot, hot. And we were going hiking and like I looked good, okay? And he posted he was taking pictures of me there throughout and he was like, and one of the things again in my last relationship was that he hated pictures and he hated the fact that I documented everything and I had the Instagram page with it. And one of the things that ended up ending things was he was upset that I talked about something that included him and had supported me up until that point. But again, anyways, so this guy did the opposite and he was like, hey, go stand here. I'm going to take this reel like this. And he's like, you can see like the vision here. And he's like, I'm all up for Instagram boyfriend. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'm here for it. And they looked good. The content, okay? Like not even, and it wasn't even just the fact that he was like making me look good. It was like he was buying into my interests. He was buying into the things that I was doing and he was very creative. I was like, it was so easy with him. And yeah, so we get back from Sedona and again, like I said, all this weird stuff happened. Definitely like we were together overnight, so definitely more than once intimate. And unfortunately, it was really good. It was connection. It was everything. It was really good. Best of my life, actually. Yeah, that's a fun thing to have in your mind that the best intimacy you've had in your life is with a child sex predator. That's a fun thing to sit with, okay? Not fun, not at all. And again, not my responsibility, didn't know, but shame after that, you're like, oh gosh, oh. So yeah, that's a thing. Anyways, so we end up getting back and just like stay at his place. At this point, like just like enamored, like best weekend, like whatever, come back and drops me off at my place and my roommate's there. And like we are vibing, okay? Like just like him and I are just like I was like, wow, this is what I've been waiting for. And he seemed equally as obsessed with me. And I don't to this day he's lied about so much I don't know if that was real or not. But I feel like that chemistry is hard to fake. But the thing is like even if it was real, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was real because the truth behind it all is that he was a very dangerous person. So get there and my roommate, like, we're just like talking and whatever. And I was like, oh, this is him, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, we had a great weekend. He's like so personable and sweet with my roommate. And he's like, wow, I really like her afterwards. And he's just like really like checking all the boxes, just like so charming. Those charming mofos. Oh my gosh. Like that is the number one thing for me that I'm just like, if you can be that like charming, extroverted, like really get along, charismatic guy. Like you can match my energy and then like also be the leader and just like this like soft, sweet masculine, but just like ugh. Like the charm gets me, okay? It's so bad. And after he left, my roommate looked at me and she was like, "You guys are amazing together. I think I'm gonna start writing a speech for your wedding. Like, I think this could be the thing for you." And I was like, "Right?" Like, we're just so like, trip was amazing, and just like everything, okay? And after that trip is when things started to derail a little bit. Now, when we talk about predators, we really basically what I just described is love bombing, okay? But I didn't see it as love bombing completely because I was also into the same kind of thing. And I have ADHD, and love bombing with ADHD is not malicious, okay? But it exists. It does. And so I definitely have to keep a check on it, but it's just like, oh, you're my hyperfixation. Like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, right? Um, and so because I wasn't thinking anything malicious, I was like, we're just on the same page. Like, it's okay if it's just like a strong connection. Like, that's fine. But then after Sedona, he started talking about, he's like, so when we get married, we should, he's like, and down the road when we have kids and all these things. And I was just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, and I ended up coming back to him and I was like, I know you really like me, but I need you to cool it just a little bit because this is feeling a little love bomby. And I did say that to him. Like, it was like, I think it was a couple weeks after Sedona. I was like, I know that we really like each other and I know that we're like, this is going to be it. And I was like, but my philosophy is like, if it's the person, what's the rush? Like, build the foundation, like we can, whatever. It was just like, and he was like, oh, yeah, yeah, okay. He was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be. And I was like, no, I'm like, it's okay. And it was just like, I told him though, I was like, this is love bombing. You need to stop. And I'm like, I don't think you're doing this like on purpose, but like we need to rein it in a little bit. And he was like, yeah, yeah, okay. Made jokes about going to Vegas and not necessarily, he's like, no, just on vacation, not to get married, just to go whatever. And I was just like, okay. But again, I was really into this guy, okay? And we hung out, I'd say we spent the night at each other's houses like 3 to 4 times a week after that. Like it moved fast. Right after Sedona, I posted him on Instagram. I also posted him on my professional Instagram. And again, the opposite of the other man. He was supporting me loudly. And I told him, I was like, I'm not gonna necessarily tag you. I'm like, but like I have reflections on this and I would like to share. And he was like, absolutely. And then we got back and there was like a video of him, like me taking a video of me walking away. And I'm goofy and smiley and whatever. So my inner child was out and I was being all cute and whatever. And he took a video of that and he put that on his Instagram. And it was like basically a song about like being in love and finding your person and whatever. And I was like, okay, whatever. And it was up for a few hours. And then the next day it was deleted. And I was like, And then as his stories after like right on the way back from Sedona, he posted like about me and he was like, this girl's so amazing. And he's like, and she's hot. And he's like, and she's a doctor. And he's like, she's just so whatever. And looking back, there was some flags. He was like status, 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 right? Like, like, again, predators and those people who are really interested in the image of how things look. He just wanted to create an image of me. It was very clear now looking back. The fact that he was like, oh yeah, she's hot and she's smart and she's all of these things. And then there was a girl who messaged him and was like, oh, I see why you're not responding to me anymore. Got it. And he was like, isn't that silly? She thinks she has a chance with me when I'm with you. Ha ha ha. Again, so many flags that I just like did not want to see. And I was like, oh yeah, no. He's like, I'm with you. He's like, he's like, it's you and I. So he's like, I'm not worried about dating apps. He's like, they're all gone. I'm not worried about a dang thing. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm with you. Like, let's do this, right? Yeah. And then at the same time, like I said, trying to work on my courses and all of the things. Then we hit a snag. And I can't remember which one of these things came first. He was unhappy with his job. They're both two very important occurrences, but I don't remember in the order that they came in. Because when I look back, it's kind of like a little bit of a trauma blur. Because like I said, I was in a very survival mode state the entire time that we were in a relationship, and I didn't realize until afterwards. So I apologize for not having the sequence of events, but the events are very vividly in my mind. So anyways, At one point, we decided it was coming up on the anniversary of my sexual assault, which is July 26th. And I was like, I'm not gonna, June 26th. I was like, I'm not really gonna do anything. Like, I don't know. And he was like, why don't we just, he's like, you love the ocean. Why don't we just like take a trip to San Diego? He's like, I'll drive. You don't have to worry about driving in the city when you're, not feeling good. He's like, but we can be together. And I was like, okay, just know I'm not going to be the best company. I was like, okay. So we go on this road trip. And again, after I can't even remember. Like, it's probably been almost a month we've been seeing each other at this point. Okay. And so while we're in California, and we're like, we're driving on road trips, you just like things come out, you just talk, right? And sometimes you like don't even realize what you're saying. It's just like just the vibe and the car and the whatever, and you're just like you get closer on road trips. He was talking about how he was scared that his boss, like something was changing with the company and the new boss was going to do a background check. And I was like, okay, why would you care about it? He's like, well, cause I wouldn't have this job. And I was like, what? What? Um, and I was like, doesn't your boss like know? Like, don't you have to? And he was like, I mean, he knows a little, he doesn't know everything. And I was like, oh, okay. And I just kind of like let that slide. And I really shouldn't have let that slide. But again, he's dropping all of these things while we're in a long car ride, okay? And I'm just with him. So I'm definitely like fawning. And then I put it on my mind. I'm like, no, no, no. Like I'm like, I have really strong feelings for this guy. This isn't what he is. He's not this kind of. It's fine. Like there's nothing wrong here. Oh gosh. Um, and so I was like, okay, yeah, like what? And he's like, I'm just like really worried about my job and just like making money. And just like, it's like these systems, they're so broken. I can't do anything for something I didn't do anything wrong. And and I'm like, it's okay. Like, you'll figure it out. Like, I'm sorry you have to deal with that, but like, there's got to be a lawyer or something. He's like, yeah, 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 I'm working on it. I was like, okay. Um, and so we go to San Diego and having a great time. And this man is so into tacos. I can't even. Like cannot even. And I also I love Mexican food. So I feel like part of our love language was Mexican food, which is so wild, and like the little details make it feel human. I think is why I'm sharing these things. Like it makes it feel human and it makes it feel very not scary. And I think that it's again important to understand those parts, that like it's a predator isn't always bad, is not always bad. Um, there were moments also, before, I think before we went on the trip, that when we first got together, somewhere like a week, probably before we ended up going to California, I was staying at his place and I dropped something and went into the bed and there was like a pair of underwear. And that pair of underwear was not mine. And I was like, hey, what's this? And he was like, oh, he was like, that's not yours? I was like, yeah. He was like, well, no one's been in here. He's like, it must be from like the old tenant because like he recently moved into this place. Okay. He was like, he's like this. I was like, I don't know. He's like, this is not. He's like, oh. He's like, this is all. He's like, this is just like. He's like, this is not my necessarily like my furniture. It's just like I just came into this little sublease, and I was like, okay. But when I look back, his tone changed very slightly, and it was the first moment when I look back and I was like, you were lying. You were lying. And he had this like laissez-faire like way of just like playing something off. It's like, oh, so you're so silly. Of course I'm obsessed with you. Like, of course I love you. Of course, whatever. And I was just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, of course. Yeah, of course. Like, and it's just like the suspicion was just immediately like, oh no, no, yeah, yeah, you're right. I'm so silly for thinking that. Silly me. Like, but like it when I look back, it makes no logical sense for someone else's underwear to be there. Like, mm, mm. And for this man to be like, yeah, yeah, I'm so obsessed with like he's us. He's like, we're gonna get married and blah blah blah. And like I was just like, no, there's no way. Like, no, no, no. Okay. So talking about California again. So in California, and there was one point as well, and again, I don't remember when in the sequence of events this happened. I was running around with him in Arizona and we were doing errands, and he was really angry that day. He was just like mad at the world. And I was like, what's going on? He was like, there's a stupid insurance thing with like my ex, and like because at this point he told me he had kids and he can't contact them, but he's still trying to financially take care of them. And I was like, okay. And he's like, this thing. And he's like, and she knows. And she's like, and he's like, and she knows that like this is a whole crap thing. So like she lets me kind of like talk to them, whatever. And I learned while on this trip in California that he is able to have video conversation with his son, but wasn't able to talk to his daughter. He's like, because what happened? And I was like, based on, and again, I should have dug deeper because that doesn't make sense to me that he wouldn't be able to talk to his daughter because of what happened, what he told me happened. I was like, okay. And so we were sitting on the beach and I was just like kind of like next to him off to the side and he gets a 10-minute call with his son. And I was just sitting there. He talked to him and then he was like, bye, buddy. And then he was sad afterwards. And I was like, this guy's sad. Like he just can't see his kid. Like that really sucks. And then like we walked around the beach afterwards, had some fun. Again, went to another bar, had some tacos. And at this point I wasn't drinking. I think if I remember correctly, on this trip I had one drink and it was like the first time that I had had a drink since I'd been in that relationship. And I was like, yeah, I don't plan on doing this again. That's what it was. I was having a hard day and I was like, I just want the taste of a blueberry mojito. And we found one and I had a blueberry mojito and it made me sick. And I was like, I do not need a blueberry mojito. This man was also into like music and culture and like he's just alive in ways that like when we were exploring, like he was like, yeah, let's go to this. He's kind of snobby and silly, but he had certain tastes and I would tease him about being snobby. He was just very particular about some things that he liked. And like he just like knew where to find the cool art and the cool exhibits and all the things and like he's just like in the know and just like everything he did was so impressive. And I ended up on that trip. He was burying me in the sand on the beach. And because I was giving myself a weighted blanket because I was overwhelmed. Like I said, it was an anniversary, it was a trauma anniversary. It was really intense. And I was kind of like semi-dissociated, not really. And this shows how safe I felt with this man for me to, in that state, want to be on a trip with him. Like that's how safe I felt. And right around a predator. And so I ran into someone who follows me on SOS and said, I've seen what you've posted about this man. I'm so glad you found someone and you guys look great together. And like, he makes you so happy and I can just see it. And I can see it when you guys are together. And she was just like, I'm really glad you're happy, Taylor. And she's like, it's good to see you grow and all these things. And I was like, wow, thank you. And when she came up, he was like taking videos of me like laughing in the sand or something. So that was quite interesting looking back, knowing what I know now. And I get this man fooled everyone. He fooled everyone. Like he fooled everyone. An interesting thing is around this time, I have always known that my biological father, aka my primary abuser, was going to show up on my page in SOS. And when they showed up, it was going to be a sign that something was going to change, that something was going to go viral, whatever. And in this relationship, I had this intuitive feeling that my dad was going to show up on my page. Okay. And so it ended up happening, but there was like my roommate at the time is someone who is very psychically in tune. And this is where some people might be like, okay, whatever. Shortly after I started dating this guy, there were, which she said, there were angels wearing armor standing outside of my house, almost like protecting it. And she's like, they're here for you. I was like, oh, okay. And at this point I was like, well, my dad's coming back. Like I felt that like my dad is going to come and like, he is a huge threat. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And she was like, yeah. And she's like, I don't know what it is, but they're here for you. I was like, okay. Looking back, that whole phenomenon where I was like very divinely protected and like she said there were angels out there and I felt just like, like I felt that something was off. I thought the off feeling was that my bio dad was going to come into the picture. The off feeling, now looking back, was who I was dating. So that whole thing happened. And so looking back, that gives me a lot of validation, like, oh, wow, hi. Okay. that I wasn't the only one who saw this. But again, I and sure the other person just played it off as like, oh no, like it took us towards the end of when had a relationship where my roommate started having some flags and concerns. And I was like, no, 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 they meant like this. But I also figured it out shortly after. But neither one of us suspected this. Like it was an absolute shock, and just sickening shock. Anyway, so some things happened in California. We're riding bikes together, being goofy together, and then we go home. I stay the night at his place. He takes more pictures and videos of me dancing in the rain because I'm so cute and stuff. Really, I'm joking. Really, I was just like, I was fully comfortable being myself, and he loved me being myself. And he got to, so he said, be himself as well. Yeah. And then at some point, I feel like this is closer to when we ended. There was a moment, like I said, he was really unhappy with his job and his boss, and he told me, and he was like, and I told him, I was like, I don't like your boss. Like I think he's toxic, and I think that he pushes alcohol. And one of the things also, he told me that he liked that I didn't drink because he's been wanting to quit, and he tries not to drink much, and he had issues in the past. He's like, but it's been a long thing. He's like, I'm way past that. And I was like, okay, yeah. I was like, as long as you're not drinking, that's fine. And like, if he did, it wasn't like, like anything huge, but at one point we were in Arizona, again, sometime in our relationship, like I said, timelines blur, but all of these things very much happen. And again, sequential order, I'm not sure. But this day was the day that I got the biggest red flags and the biggest, oh, this person might not be who they say they are. This is terrifying. And I always notice when I start to figure something out and I'm in the presence of someone who's not safe, because I get really quiet and I start like very calmly distancing in my head. What are the steps I need to do to get away from this person? What are the whatever? That's what happened when I broke up with my boyfriend before this. They hit a point where they were just screaming at me and out of control and drunk and high at the same time and like attacking me verbally, hours and hours and hours on the same thing, and wasn't listening to me and everything. And it was at that moment that I just got really quiet. And in my head, I was like, what do I need to disconnect? I need phone. I need them out. I can stay here. Like I was going through my safety plan in my head at that moment. So I started noticing myself getting quiet this day. So it was a day, I think I was off work or something. I was home and I was pulling cards, and I was not like, I'm a tarot oracle girly. Okay. I have a very strong intuition and I kind of know things anyways, but tarot and oracle for me is sometimes like, this is the proof that you're not crazy. And it's very dead on when I get these types of things. And, I was like, okay. And I was like, at first I was sitting in my bed and I got a really strong intuitive feeling like, go pull cards. And I was like, okay. I was drawn to a certain deck, whatever. And then I pulled it and it said, pay attention. I just heard this like very intuitive whisper. It was like, pay attention. And I was like, okay. And I pulled a card and one of them said distracted and it had beer bottles. There was another one that had a picture and it said child or children. And it was a black and white picture with like little kids. And then there was a couple others and I don't remember those necessarily. And then Jack calls. And again, I hear, pay attention. Okay. So I answer the phone. And he's panicked. Like last I heard, he was supposed to come over to my house after work. We're just gonna stop off with some coworkers, and he's like, I gotta do this thing afterwards, like schmooze, and then he's like, then I'm gonna come by. Okay. So he's like running out of breath, and he's like, where are you right now? And I was like, huh? He's like, where are you right now? I need you. And I was like, oh, I'm like, are you okay? And he was like, I crashed. I was like, what? And at this point, I just hear panic in his voice. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah. He's like, I forget. He's like, my assistant was driving a car, and he's like, and I was messing with it earlier, and I was driving home, and I just crashed, and like the whole freaking thing fell off. And I was, the whole freaking thing fell off. What? And he was talking about like the axle. completely disconnected from the car. So it was like the wheel and then the whole like sticky thing that was still connected to the wheel and was just like on the side of the road. So and he was like, I'll send you the thing. Like, he's like, I'll send you the pin. Just come get me. And I was like, okay. And I was maybe like 15 minutes away. And again, I'm just very much getting intuitive feeling like, be careful, pay attention, be careful, pay attention. It wasn't saying don't go. It was saying be careful, pay attention. And I was like, okay. So I'm just like slowly, I'm like going to the bathroom, whatever, just getting ready. And I'm just like not immediately like jumping. And he texts and he's like, where are you? In all caps. And there's like some things that are jumbled. And I was like, and he's like, this, and he's like, I'm sending. He's like, where are you? Where are you? And so I texted him. I was like, I'm on the way. And he calls me. And he was like, hey. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, don't go to this thing. He's like, I'm going to send you a new one. He's like, come to this intersection and then I'll find you. And I was like, okay. And so we go to this intersection and I start to notice, I see his car like trashed on the side of the road. And I was like, whoa, okay. And at this point I was coming up towards it and it was parked the other way on the side of the street. And so I was like looking for him. I was like, I don't see him by the car, in the car, whatever. And he calls me and I start to see like these cop cars come around the corner and he's like, don't go there. And I was like, what? And he's like, come down this street. And I was like, okay. And I'm like driving down this like residential area that's really nearby. And I was like, what is happening? And at this point I'm starting to realize like, hi, danger, Will Robinson. But I'm like, I kind of go into like fawn mode and I'm like, what is happening? And then he jumps out of someone's yard and runs into my car and goes, go. And I was like, what? And goes. And I just start driving. I was like, just go back to my place. And I was like, okay. And again, I was like, what is happening? He's like, I'll tell you later, just go. And then I start to realize he smells like alcohol. He was driving drunk and crashed his car. And again, he's going on and on. He's like, stupid boss, you're right. He's like, they're horrible people and blah, blah, blah. And they're pushing alcohol on me and I didn't even want it. And he's like, and then the car crashed because the assistant's been driving it too hard and she messed everything up. And I told her to be careful with it, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, and like this dude is so drunk. By the time we get to his house, he is stumbling and falling over. Like falling over. And when I tell you, and the interesting thing about where he's staying, so he's in a mansion, and he said that I rent it from a doctor, and the doctor is like one of their seasonal houses. And they don't stay here. So it's like a timeshare, and I basically get this place to myself, but I just get like the casita, and I get access to the yard, and I help them take care of the plants. Well, the interesting thing about this house is to get into the casita, like I said, it's like a mansion. There's a big wall all the way around the entire mansion area, right? But there's also a very tall metal door. Like we're talking like 2 stories tall, big metal door. Might have been a little bit shorter than that, but it's really tall. And the only way you could get in and out of the door was with a lock and a key. A lock and a key that only he had access to. Okay. So he gets his keys he had like, I don't even know if he had his keys when he unlocked it or it was unlocked or he somehow got it unlocked to get us into the casita. And then I'm like panicking, like what is going on? And I'm like terrified at this point. And I'm like, what? And I go and I close the windows. I'm like, and also, of note here, biggest fears are cops and the justice system because of how I was treated and how they were weaponized against me with my narcissistic parent, okay? And like I called for help many times and I didn't really get in trouble, but they didn't help me. And they believed the things that my abuser was saying. So I don't have the best anxiety when it comes to cops, okay? So at this point, I was just in total survival mode. I was not thinking clearly. And he is drunk, completely like swinging, can't even stand up, slurring his words. And it was bad. It was really bad. And he was just like aggressively yelling about everything he hates about his job, about his boss, about the whole situation in his life and his stupid ex-wife and just whatever. And I'm starting to notice this man is an aggressive person. But at the same time this is happening, we were at one point afterwards, we were standing in the pool and like in the shallow end. And he was like so drunk, he was falling over in the pool. Okay. And he just like leaned into me. He was like, "You're so amazing." He was like, "I told my coworkers I'm gonna marry you. I'm gonna marry you." He's like, "I just love you." And it was just like angry and aggressive and everything else to the rest of the world. And then he would look at me and he literally, his body melted. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, I was like, yeah. And I, again, realizing I was like, let's go inside. And he was like trying to like hug me and kiss me. And I was like, let's just go inside. Um, so I helped him out of the pool and then realized that like he hadn't eaten. He didn't have much in the little casita. And it wasn't even like I said, it wasn't even like a full kitchen. So he didn't really have like anything but a microwave. And so ended up door dashing. And then this is when he realized, oh my gosh, I don't have the keys to open the door. So not only am I starting to realize this man is extremely aggressive, and again, it's not towards me, so I don't necessarily feel like I am threatened at this point. He's being very kind and sweet towards me. "I'm so happy I have you. Thank you for coming. I love you so much." Like everything. And I was like, "What is going on?" And he's like, "Well, they can't find me here." He's like, "Don't worry about it. They can't find me here." As I'm like closing the windows. And I was like, "Huh?" And he was like, "Yeah." He's like, "All my stuff's in California." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "No one knows that I live here and they can't know. Like no one can know." He's like, "No one." And again, he's like mumbling and he's drunk off his ass. And I was like, what? He's like, "I won't be able to do what I do. You know that." And I was like, "I know that." Like, what? um, and so I just was just like, okay, let's get food. Like, again, I can't leave. I'm terrified. If I confront you about anything right now, I'm afraid of what's going to happen because I just saw how aggressive you were and threatening you were to everyone else in your life but me. I don't need to be the person right now who you come after. So I was like, let's just get some food. He's like, "Here, take my phone, order whatever you want." And I was like, okay. So I ordered DoorDash. And like I said, we realized that no key and he can't get out. So he ends up scaling the wall and gets the food and scales back over and is so drunk he almost can't get back over. But he does. And I take care of him. And being the good girlfriend, I'm like, "Oh, he just drank too much and whatever." And again, I just like not fully sinking in that this man drove drunk, crashed his car to the point where the whole freaking wheel with the little thing attached to it, which I think is the axle, popped off. I'm pretty sure I still have pictures of all this, by the way. And he just, yeah, the cops were apparently looking for him. And he left. And he was like, "I think I left my work computer, whatever." So wake up the next day. I stayed the night because, again, I couldn't leave. Okay. And I wasn't scaling that wall. It was way too tall. I was not coordinated. I was like, and I also don't like, I can't. Anyways, so wake up and he is so remorseful in the morning. He was like, "I'm so sorry." Like, he was just like, "It's never going to happen again. That was like such a bad side of me." And he's like, he's like, "I really just hate all these things." And he's like, "People are out to get me." And he's like, "I just love you so much. Please, please, please." And at this point, there was something inside of me that was feral. And I was like, "You do not do that again. Do you hear me?" And like, I was just like, I went off on him. It was like a mother scolding a child. And I swear that it was not even me. It was like something that came through me that was just like, "Ah, do not." And he was like, "I know, I'm so sorry." And he was like laying on my lap and he was like, "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry." And he starts crying. He's just like, "It's in a really low spot and I don't like my job." And and I was just like, okay. And he's like, "I need to go get my car." And I was really annoyed with how easy this was. So he's like, "Oh, I found my keys." I was too drunk, didn't see it. So the keys were there all along, on the other side of the wall. That he was like, "Oh, found them." After, he wasn't drunk and could scale the wall and whatever. So he found them on his property, that he was subleasing. And then he, and he was like, "I need to get my car." And I was like, okay. And if we remember where we left things, the car was crashed and abandoned on the side of the road and cops were on their way to it. when I picked him up, thinking that I was gonna help him with something. And I'm like, am I accessory to a crime? Like, did I, like, I don't, and even now I'm like, I did not knowingly do anything or know anything. I was just so in shock and survival mode that I was just like, oh my God. And then there was a fear of telling anyone, because if I tell anyone, what if he tries to implicate me and make me as like someone who did something wrong? And I was like, I don't, uh, okay, like, terrifying, right? And I'm like, I didn't, freeze mode, fawn mode until whatever. So then this is something that happens with people after you're in an unsafe situation. You try and either buddy up to the person or make it seem like it wasn't that bad. Like there's something in your mind that wants to try and like appease the person so that you're not a threat. And the situation didn't actually happen the way you perceived it. It's just like, if it didn't happen, I'm not unsafe. Ha ha ha. So, like I said, after I just like screamed at him, yeah, and then he used some things against me. So then we were driving, and he was like, "Okay, I called around and I found the cars at this impound lot." And all he had to do was show up to this impound lot, show his ID, claim his car, pay a small fee, and that was it. The cops had picked it up, weren't involved. All of his stuff was in there, everything, and I was like, "Huh." And while he was in his drunken frenzy where he was just like vomiting everything, one of the things he told me was that I'm so intuitive, and he's like, I tell everyone about you. He's like, you're dangerous to me, but I love you so much. And it just like it scares him how much I know and how smart I am and how I figure things out and all of these things. And he's like, you're just like, you really were on, on the dot with the boss. He's like, you're really intuitive. He's like, it scares me how intuitive you are. I was just like, what? Um, and I was like, why would that scare you? But okay. And like, I guess, I mean, being so intuitive without understanding why kind of scares me a little bit too. Okay. But so anyways, that whole happened. And, so he gets the car, and I'm so mad because it was like, there were no consequences for him just doing something like that. And I was like, ah, and I went off on him. I did again. I was like, I will break up with you in a second. I was like, if you know what drinking is to me, I'm like, you pull this. He's like, I know I was influenced by everyone else. I'm so sorry. He was like, I had a dream that like my car was crashed and he's like, he's like, I didn't know if it was reality, if it was whatever. And I was just like, what? And he was like, and then I saw, he's like, then there's like a spiritual sign and something. And I was just like, you don't do this again. Like, I was just like, I didn't, so I hung out with him that day. And, we were just sitting after a coffee shop. And then there was something shortly after where there was an issue with his insurance. And he said that his ex, who I thought was ex-wife, who had the kids that he couldn't see, looking back, I think it was the other one that I found out about later, was not supposed to be on his insurance anymore, but they billed him for it. And he was with me, and he had to get something notarized that day. And so we're in my car. I was the one driving. I was in the passenger seat, whatever. And he's like, I just need to stop at this place real fast, get this notary. And I was like, okay. So we did. Takes a picture of it, send it to his work thing, whatever. He was mad that all happened, dealt with it. Okay. So let's get to the point where we break up. So right before we break up, he has this meeting in California, and he says, this is going to be me being able to see my kids. He's like, this is going to be the ruling to see if I can see my kids. And when this all happened, the way he shared about what was going on in his life, he made it seem like this was a very distant past, not an active court case. Yeah. He also mentioned that there was a girl when he was in jail, and he kind of alluded to that he just put on a guise that he was in love with her, so he had someone. But then he told me that she was crazy because she had his stuff dropped off in a box to his family's house. And I was like, while he was in jail. And I was like, how does that make her crazy? Okay. But again, not looking at the red flags. And when a man goes, oh, all my exes are crazy. Again, I was not looking at them. I'm ashamed that I did not look at them, but this is just what happened. So then he goes out to California and has this court thing and says that This is going to be the thing where I'm going to see my kids. And again, he's like, I'm not drinking. I'm not doing any of this. He's like, I just want to get through this and get home. He's like, this could be a PTSD thing for me. He's like, I want you to know. And me, as someone who's been a PTSD person, I'm like, I get it. I'm here for you. Like, okay. So he goes and basically he doesn't get his kids. He doesn't get to see his kids. Nothing changes in the order. If anything, it was made worse. I don't remember fully. But he posted some things on Instagram about him being at a bar drinking. And I was like, and there was like something with like someone's boobs or something in the background, or talking about someone's boobs. It was just like vulgar. I was just like, what? And there were other people in my life at this point who were following him. And one of them messaged me and was like, hey, did you see what your boyfriend just posted? And I was like, yeah, that's really weird. So I called him, no answer. And basically he just disappears for like 24 to 48 hours. He's like, when I get back, he's like, we're gonna whatever. And he just like starts drinking and just like going off the deep end essentially. Okay. And he's just like, I'm just so sad, whatever. And then he's like having a hard time that week. And then he also had to afterwards go to a work trip. And on this work trip, during this time, he was supposed to like take some time like in the evening and like connect with me. He's like, he's like, the way these things work, I'm definitely gonna have to like schmooze a little bit in the evening. He's like, but I'll definitely call you and I want to talk to you and I miss you and all the things. And I was like, okay, whatever. At this point, I was probably way too needy. But again, I had this like infatuation with this man. At this point, I had very strong feelings for him. And I was just like trying to get attention when he was ignoring me. But so I was just like texting him a few times. He didn't really answer. And I was like, okay. During the time that he was gone, my biological father popped up on my page. It was a really hard day for me. It was a really big trigger. And I wanted my boyfriend, which like makes sense, right? And he basically told me, I can't make time for you. And then lashed out and got really upset with me. And I was like, okay, this kind of PTSD thing is not going anywhere. So I kind of made the decision when on top of, and this was shortly after the whole occurrence with the car and everything, and it was just like getting worse. And I was like, okay, I can't tell this man how to heal. This is not a situation I need to be part of. I don't know what's going on. I can't do this. So he gets back and he avoids me when he gets back. Like he's like, oh yeah, I'll see you. And he just goes radio silent, turns off everything. Another weird thing this man did, after we went to Sedona, he turned on his notifications where he just did it by himself. He shared his location with me. And then there were moments where he would be like, oh yeah, my location glitches sometimes. And it would say, so-and-so turned off their notifications. And he's like, yeah, look at it. It's like, it's on right now and it's not working, blah, blah, blah. He did that another time during when he was getting back. So he turned off his location and it turned out that he went to a bar, got drunk. I don't know if he got beat up. I don't know, whatever. He said something about like sleeping on the side of the road. Like he just not okay, not stable, not what I want. We're also at this point like really close, like a week or so out from me launching Overcoming the Foundations, my very first big business venture. So I decide I'm going to break up with him, but I know that he's not going to talk to me if I come in all aggressive and hostile. So I messaged him and I was like, hey, can we just talk? I'm going to bring tacos. I just want to talk to you. Like, I just want to see you. I want to make sure you're doing okay. And I do. I bring over his favorite agua fresca, bring over some tacos, and I sit him down and I'm like, I can't go on like this. I care about you. I can't tell you how to heal. It's like, I would like it to be us at the end of this, but honestly, at this point, with how you're dealing with things, like I can't do that. In my past relationships that I've dealt with things that I'm like, I can't repeat a cycle. I can't do this. And so he was just like, wow, he's like, you are so sweet. Even when you're breaking up with me, you bring me tacos and my favorite drink just to say that we can't be together. He's like, you are the sweetest girl that I have ever met. And he was like, he's like, I'm so in love with you. It's going to be us at the end of this. He's like, I will get my act together. I want to. He's like, I'm going to stop drinking. He's like, I'm going to do whatever I can. He's like, and I'm going to show you that I can be the one for you. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's fine. I'm like, but I'm not going to wait around. I'm not going to wait around. Like, I was very clear. I was like, I'm not if I meet someone, I meet someone. I was like, I would love to keep in contact with you. Like, I care about you. I want you to be okay. I know I understand PTSD. Like, I get it. But I was like, the way you're coping is not okay. And he ghosted his therapist at the same time, too. And I was like, and for someone who values therapy so much, you're not talking to your therapist. Like, this is a big red flag and not okay. And he was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So we broke up. And I was really sad. But again, I was like, if it's meant to come back together, it'll come back together. At this point, I was like, this is a spiritual connection. This is a spiritual connection. There'll be something that happened, whatever. So, this man had me so on a hook. We had like a playlist together. I added a song like I'll Be Missing You to it, like ugh, gag. I look back now and I was like, wow, Taylor. Wow, Taylor. And just like, yeah, it was just like, it was really hard. And he still travels for work. So he was like gone off in business. And it was a couple weeks after we broke up, that we were supposed to just like get together and like just catch up over coffee. When we got together, well, we were supposed to get together that day and he didn't respond to me. And instead of him responding to me, he posted a picture on Instagram with him and a girl. And he said, the only thing that I love more than this vineyard and this wine is this girl. So lie, 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 lie. And it was a very blatant lie, right? So like it went from like him just like almost being like submissive, like even in body language and everything, and just like, I'm gonna make this right. I love you so much, blah, blah, blah. All of these things that he said to me that I was like, yeah, I mean, I believe you, but I need to see it. It was not that I didn't believe him at that point when he was saying those things. It was like, it's going to be really hard. It's going to take time. Like, I'm not, whatever. And he just, I realized afterwards that he had lied. And then I looked back and I was like, what else did he lie about? And as soon as that lie came out, my mind went to that incident with everything that happened with the car and totaling the car and him saying, oh, the boss may be doing all of these like lack of accountability signs. And then like him just like lashing out. And I was just like, ah. And then I remembered. So like I wasn't thinking about it in the end of during our relationship past that night when I look back, is that he said, they can't find me here. Everything's tied to California. This is how I can do what I do. Don't worry about it. No one can find me. I do this on purpose. And I was like, what else is there? And then I remembered that his Bumble profile was not his name. It was a nickname. And then I remembered his Bumble profile was not his age. It was listed as 31. He was 37. So it could easily just look like, oh, font difference, whatever. And also in the middle of our relationship, we did like the astrology compatibility thingy because I'm spiritual woo-woo, love me for it, okay? And he told me that his birthday was 3/23/1985. Okay. So I pulled out whatever, and that would have made him 37 instead of 31. And that's when I was like, oh, weird. And he was like, oh, yeah, yeah. He's like, you just must have read it wrong. And I was like, oh, yeah, I must have just, like, yeah, whatever. But I was 29. I didn't have my preferences set to 37. So looking back, again, another red flag. Ha, ha, ha. But what's really interesting about that is when I looked him up, and also like all of the things were like soulmate, best possible love, so good for each other. Like it was like literally like off the charts compatibility, which is exactly what I felt. I was like, this just confirms it for me. Like this is what I feel in all these things, right? And it was very much like everything this man did was extremely calculated from the moment that he did it. And it was just played off as charisma. And it was played off as victim. And it was played off enough truth to twist. And it was played off so well. So intelligent, so charismatic, so good with words, freaking poet, writes beautifully, and used all of that to his advantage. And so I see this picture of them, and I am like ready to rage. And this is like inner teen is out, like, how dare you? And all of this happened. And I hadn't really like laid into him the way I wanted to about what happened with the car that he crashed. And I added that in this message. I basically was like, I went off. And before I went off, like I basically was like, I was like, and you did this and you said this and like, this was a lie and this was a lie and the drinking, you're going to quit drinking and this was a lie and it's a slap in the face. And I was like, done. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. And I went off. Like, I looked like crazy ex-girlfriend. Okay. Um, and looking back, that actually is a really good thing because like it was, I've really much just like unleashed. And I sat there before I sent it. I checked with my intuition. I was like, do I send this? It's like, yes. I was like, okay. So I did. And the last thing I said, and you lied about this, and you lied about this, and you lied about this, and you're lucky you're not in jail, and you need to stop. I'm like, this is ridiculous, and blah, blah, blah. And then I put, what else are you lying about at the end? I said, if you're lying about this, what else are you lying about? And his response was, yeah, I'm done talking to you. Boom. Okay. So I left it like that. So in his eyes, I just look like this crazy, jealous ex-girlfriend. Okay. Which is actually really good for this story and to how this all came to be. So after I did that, I sat there and I started having a pit in my stomach and I was like, what else did he lie about? And if you remember, I saw his full name on his, not his birth certificate, his diploma that he had sitting out that he was proud of. I Googled that, including the middle name, because it was a fairly common name. And the first thing that came up was a child or a sex offender's registration. When I look it up and go into it, it's in California. The website for that was Megan's Law. And it said the name, it said everything about them. They looked disheveled and not even like the same person, but it was clear it was them. And it said date of birth 3/2/1985. My birthday is 3/2. Now it's 3/2/1993, but it's the same freaking birthday. So this is when I realized how calculated this man was. He had legal documents. I've seen his license. He also had multiple licenses. Again, I should have noticed that he carried with him. His license said 323. And then when you look at the sex offenders registration page, it says 3/2. Could there have been a typo? Yeah. But I think he wanted it to be that way. I think he planned it ahead to say that if anyone could think of, I could just say, oh, that's a typo. If they ever caught me, oh, that's just a typo. Okay, cool. So now I'm like, okay, me and this creep have the same birthday. And then I go on to read the story about how this man was caught by an undercover cop. And there's like multiple news articles on it. That something about like was caught at a store and there was lubricant and something else. And they were caught on Valentine's Day. And they mentioned to me when we were dating one thing that Valentine's Day was hard for them. So when that comes up, just to know that. And I was like, okay. They were caught on Valentine's Day. And it's extremely terrifying to me because I look now and some of the details that were shared remind me a lot of these allegations about Diddy. Whew. Anyways, and so he was caught by this undercover cop because it said some social media page, something like board messaging something. He was inquiring about family incest. And it just said inquiring about family incest. It didn't say what, it didn't say anything, okay? And and then again it said was arranged to go meet a minor to abuse them was basically the conversation with this person, okay? That ended up being an undercover cop and I guess posed as the parent of this child. Supposedly. I don't know. This is what was in the article. And then they got caught, like I said, with lubricant and something else. And they went to jail. They got convicted, all of these things. And they are put on lifetime registration of the sex offenders list. I was like, oh my gosh. And I called my roommate over. I was like, what? She had someone at the time that could look more into things. We also found assault charges, drunken, disorderly type things with an officer. Like it just, the person I knew and the person who showed up in this paper was not the same person. messy, definitely had some issues in dealing with PTSD stuff, yes, but like even so, even with all of those flags that I look back as I'm telling the story, I'm like, yeah, this is a flag. Yeah, this was a red flag. Yeah, this is a red flag. Yeah, this is a red flag. Um, the way he treated me made me feel very safe. Um, so safe that I didn't look at the other things as deeply as to what he was doing. But again, I was coming out of a very triggered place from the moment that I found this relationship, like into going into this, just to be like, hi. Even at one point, the people who I was working with, they stopped like icing me out at the time. They were like, just be careful about like going, like making big plans with someone you barely know. And I was like, it's fine. It's whatever. Um, Not good. Not good. And anyone who was like, this is moving a little fast, I was just defending him. I was like, no, no, no. Like, yeah, we're doing things, but like, we're not committing fast. Like, it's fine. Um, and again, people didn't start having concerns till the end, right around when I started having concerns, at least voicing those concerns. But initially the narrative was, wow, you guys are perfect together. Yeah, yeah, we are. Even astrology says we are. Woo, woo. Um, even when you put in the real birthday, it still says that. It actually says soulmate on the thing. It actually says this is a very important relationship in your life. That's a kicker. That somehow that is my soulmate? What? I'm not going to put that much weight on those things, but I can tell you that that's just like, ugh. So anyways, that happened. Um, and I ended up, I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And because I knew that they had kids and because I knew like everything, I was like, I am the only one who knows where they live and where they work. And when I looked everything up online, everything like LinkedIn, everything said lives in California, lives in California, lives in California. I was like, they don't live in California. I've spent multiple nights in a row at their house. And if I'm not at their house, they're at my house. They don't live in California. They live here. And they're hiding out as an unregistered sexual predator. Okay. All my fears, everything comes into question, right? Like again, justice system, all of these things, and like the trauma from the essay when I was 22 and the justice system issue with that. I was like, so I ended up calling Scottsdale Police Department, and they connected me to the sexual victims area. And I talked to someone and they were like, okay, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and this will show you that they've been here. This is where they work. I know because I was physically there with them. We picked up a laptop one time before or after going to the beach, something like that. And I was like, and also like I have pictures that on this date they crashed this car. They picked it up here. Like, and they were like, why didn't you report this sooner? I was like, I was scared. And honestly, I didn't put all the pieces together until I realized they lied about something really big after our relationship. And then it was, what are they lying about? Like, what else are they lying about? And they were like, okay. And so I give all this information. And at this point, I'm terrified. Okay. So it takes a couple weeks, and they're texting my mutual person, like they're like sending a song or something. There was like, yeah, Taylor went crazy because she saw that I liked another girl after we broke up. Ha ha ha. Like, okay, that's the narrative you want. Meanwhile, I'm working with the police to try and figure out how to monitor him, and like it's an undercover operation essentially to get him and put him away. Okay. Interesting. So again, terrifying, but I'm like, I am the only one who knows this information. This is a sexual predator that thinks they're so smart and they're hiding out and they can get out away from things. I just, okay. So like I said, deal with that. And then my PTSD starts coming out. Okay. So they're traveling, all of these things. After that message, I'm pretty sure they blocked me on Instagram, or I blocked them, or both. And I also found out that in the middle of our relationship, towards the end, they were soliciting some people on my page. I got messages like, hey, your boyfriend is messaging me and my friend, and that's really weird. I was like, oh, okay. Interesting. All right then. Cool. And yeah, that was a thing. I have no idea who that girl was. He said that there was a coworker who he was talking to as a friend and was like kind of interested in him. But it like didn't really pan out into anything. So I still don't know who that girl was. But anyways, so there were just so many things that revealed that like he lied about things. And there, like I said, there were cracks in the mask. And the cracks in the mask really started to show after things didn't go his way in the legal thing. And claimed it was just PTSD, but there's definitely I do believe there is PTSD. There also is one thing that is a saving grace for me looking back. When he told me the story about his family, and he said something about how someone close in his family, either was a cousin or something, is now married to his ex-wife, and he's like it's just like enraging, and he was like, and I'm terrified that he's going to do something to harm my daughter. And I sat and like, again, that was like kind of weird to say, but I was like, oh, but again, there's big fear in this man's eyes, and it was just like crying, and I was just like, I wonder, like, that's just an out of nowhere connection to make. I was like, either this man is telling on himself, looking back, he was telling on himself, or something happened in his family when he was younger that would make him think that that was a possibility. So I still don't know the full story. All I know is I was told that he was trapped and led astray by someone and set up, thinking that he was going to see someone who was of age and he was going to date them and like go hook up with them. And it ended up being a minor. And like when I'm thinking minor, he made it seem like 16, 17. You know what I mean? And the cops were waiting for him and they took him away. And just like, that is a very, very different story than what is on the news articles, which just says that they were inquiring about family incest and the messages were plotting to harm and under like a child. And they were meeting up to do that and ended up being an undercover cop. Like, that is very different. And I even told the police what they said to me. I was like, this is what I was told. This is who they said they were. They had a Bumble profile. They had all of these things. I was like, this is everything I have. And I gave it all. And they're like, well, we didn't tell him it was you. And I was like, I'm the only one who knows all this stuff. He knows it's me. After all this, I then saw a very different version of this person. So not only did he tell my mutual person that, oh yeah, Tay's being crazy, ha ha ha, did she tell you? And she was like, no, I don't really talk to her, like, what's going on, ha. And he just kind of played it off as like, oh, she's just mad that I like another girl, and I posted another girl, which was not the case. Like, a little bit, I was like, I was hurt that there was such a lie and that I believed so much of it, I think is what it was. And that was just a big indication to be like, wow, I need to look back into things. I should have trusted my gut. I should have listened more. I should have whatever. Again, freaking guardian angels with armor guarding my house since I was dating this guy. Like, I was getting very intuitive things right before a night that was really scary. And I was told to pull cards that said something about children and literally had beer bottles and said distracted. Like, literally was telling me, like, the world was telling me, hi, you're protected, you're safe, but also maybe pay attention because this is something to do with children, and also there's alcohol involved here. And then I find out that they were driving drunk and crashed a car, and they lost their children. Can't make this shit up. So yeah, I don't doubt my intuition, but I wasn't listening to it fully. And there was one time when I kind of like tuned into his energy. Again, I can do that. It's kind of scary, but I can. And it was very much like normally it's just like people are just like, whatever. It was like this like hunched over, shame, sad, disconnected, just like, don't even look at me. Don't even like, it was just like so ashamed and guilty and sad and couldn't even like look at me. And I was just immediately like, oh, okay. And then I remember like tuning into that, and then my heart just like jumped, and I like I was like, oh no, that's I'm not supposed to, like, I don't, no, thank you. And there was a lot of cognitive dissonance. Like, there was a lot of confusion, and I think I like tried to lean on some things where I'm like, well, this can't be confused. And then I remember I was pulling cards one time about him at the beginning of our relationship, and there was a card that again, I was drawn to a certain deck, and it said narcissist and empath being used. And again, it was one of those jump backs, like, oh no, that's not it. I just put it away. Okay. Signs were there. I didn't want to see the signs. I wanted to be in a relationship publicly. I felt like I was treated opposite of my last relationship. Man was intelligent. There seemed to be a lot of things that aligned, and adored me and loved me loudly, and all of these things that I didn't get before, and was emotionally intelligent and valued therapy and just knew exactly how to mirror me. Even introduced me to a new like Sarah Bareilles track, and was just like when we were in Sedona, just like vibing out, singing along to Sarah Bareilles, and all like, it was just mirroring, 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 mirroring. And yeah, it was just, looking back, I was really dumb. I was really naive. And they took my past and made it theirs, a story that was convincing based on my own past and the other things that I've dealt with. And I didn't give them everything all the time. It's 12/12 as I say this. Cool, cool. But it messed me up. It messed me up mentally. And I had a really hard time coping with it. And like I said in the last episode, like even to this day, it is very hard for me to see him, who I knew, the person who I dated, the person who I fell for, and I feel like in love with, but like, again, there was so much cognitive dissonance and so much trauma. I don't really know, but I have very strong feelings. And then to see the person who came out afterwards, the person who was depicted on paper, the lies that came out, the what was shown on the Instagram, the like all of this, and I just, and what, how they were treating my followers, like the really like weird solicitory, like just oh yeah. So then this came out, and they started like, after they got arrested, it took some time. I was like, the description of them, a little bit taller than 6 feet, and just like muscular build and like lighter hair. And so I would be walking around, and I was like, this person's going to kill me. This person's going to find out that I'm the one who's doing this. They haven't gotten arrested yet. And it took weeks. It took weeks for them to get arrested. Cause like I said, they were traveling, whatever. And it was just terrifying, to say the least. And so my PTSD, even when I was walking my dog in public, I would be like, I see someone like this, whatever. And I swear, I was going to the dog park that I normally do. And one thing that he posted is that he got a motorcycle, and it was on his like little profile bubble right before he blocked me, or after, or I found a way to see it. And I knew what it looked like, and like the studs on it and all the things. And there was a shirt that he wore. It was a blue V-neck, and it was almost like a speckled-ish pattern. And he wore that when we were in California. We were riding bikes. And I remember that. A photographic memory with some things. And there was this man on this bike the day before he got arrested, and was driving, like, I was like waiting at the light, and he was coming from the other way, driving to then turn left to go like parallel, like perpendicular the other way, okay? Or parallel the other way. And I swear it was him. It was the same kind of bike. It was the V-neck. It was all of that. And I was like, this is him. And so I reached out to the police, and I was like, this is what I just saw. I'm afraid it's him. Like, I think he's back. I think he's back. I think he's back. I don't know why I would see him, but I think he's back. They called me back later. They're like, it says he's not here yet. Like, his location isn't in town. And then it was like a day or two later that he got arrested and got caught at the house. And they found him. And this man is so calculated. The house was in a trust, so they couldn't even find the owner. It took a while for the cops to find the owner. So the house was in a trust. And then they were like, do you have any other information? I was like, no, he just told me that it was like a doctor that was like a timeshare. So it took a while for them to get the permission from the owner to use the surveillance and to catch him and whatever. And then the office, there was another office from that company in California. So they said they worked at the office, but they worked in the California office. They were very clearly in Arizona. Like, it was just very, very clear for at least a month that I know of. Okay. Yeah. So they got arrested, and they told me, they were like, well, it's a good thing because he has a really high bail. And like I said, this guy works in tech. He has a lot of money. And I was like, that's not a lot for this guy. And they're like, you should feel really good. Like, no one's gonna, whatever. And then he gets out on bail. He gets out on bail and he starts posting these very cryptic, like, song lyrics and like poetry about things like revenge and being really stupid. And like, basically, like, it was indirect threats of like, you need to watch your back. And it was updating the bio of their Instagram because that's the only thing I could see as I'm blocked. And it was like a teenage girl updating song lyrics on their status, except for it was using their Instagram bio. And I was like, and I was terrified at this point. And I ended up staying at a friend's house because I was so scared to go back to my place. Because I was like, he knows where I live. He knows the code for my gate. He was like, we're in a relationship. This dude could kill me. This guy could kill me. I thought I knew him. I don't know him. Like, I'm terrified right now. And again, he's just making indirect threats, but it's very clear because I know him. I know exactly what that is. And I know that's a threat. I know that's a way of like being like, Taylor, I know it's you. Then, after we broke up, one of the things that he said he was going to do was go to the self-development seminar because he wanted to better himself and he wanted all of these things. And I think at one point he might have meant that he wanted to get better and he wanted to be better for me. I don't know. But based on his actions, he signed up for the self-development seminar and it ended up being later. Okay. And so he goes to the self-development seminar and the person who sponsored him gets a call that he walked out. He was really upset and he left in the first day. They told him to follow up with him. They want him to finish all of these things, okay? So when she connects with him, he mentions that I'm a horrible person and he left because he can't imagine someone like me being so horrible, going through that and doing that same thing and going through that program and being such a bad person. He couldn't handle it. And then he said that he was going to get back at me, that I need to watch out and he's coming after me. And at that point, I was just like, huh. And she's like, and she's reassuring me. She's like, you can't do anything. You didn't do anything wrong. But again, I know how predators work. And my biological father has planted things to try and make things look a certain way. Like there was, I'll go into that in a bit. Like basically it's like, I know how predators can manipulate and all of those things. Okay. Like I know. So looking back, the things that I missed, some of the signs that I want people to understand. There is a look. There is a look in someone's eyes. There is some people call it a narcissist stare. Some people call it, it's just like the dead in the eyes. There is a look. There is a like, I'm not here energy. There are also in moments, there's a piercing look that comes through that's so haunting that you just see the predatory glance for a second. You see it. I saw it once towards me one time. And we were just like laying in bed or something and I saw it and I was like, and then I was like, what? And he was like, you're just so beautiful. And I was like, that was not desire. That was something wicked. I've seen it before. And there's a calculation. There's a very stone cold calculation afterwards. It goes from the charm before to the threats and trying to groom and the people around me to change the reputation of me. Trying to change the story again to make it believable to their point. This person told me that they were writing a book about the injustices of everything that happened. They did write a book. They wrote 2. And they're published. And I am shocked, truly shocked. The way that they spin things is a narrative of such lack of accountability and weaponizing and saying the justice system, the justice system, the justice system. Oh, and then these people were out to get me. And then there's a technicality and all of these things. And, the funny part, the funny thing. One thing that I missed in telling. I have a paper. So it was actually this day, 2 years ago, as I'm recording this day 2 years ago, that I went back to Sedona with just me and my dog because I was like, this place is tainted and this is my place. I'm not going to let this person taint this place for me. And I got to the point where I I went to go see them. And before I went to Sedona, I was like, I'm gonna get my car washed and like, and also like do the whole like deep dive, whatever. So the night before I went, I noticed like a paper stuck in the passenger side door. Pulled it out, and it was something that was notarized with his name, the address that was on the California address in the child sex offender registration, notarized. It was dissolving a domestic partnership. So the thing, this whole notary thing, and just like do some paperwork to get them off the insurance, was actually dissolving a domestic partnership after they met me. What? So in between, so I'm thinking that there is this like ex-wife and these two kids, right? And can't see the girl, talks to the other, whatever. There apparently is more than that. There was also another girl to this point that I knew, domestic partnership. Except for there was apparently another newborn with the most recent girl that they also were not allowed to see. What? It is, I still am just like, how, this person is so smart, so calculated. They also told me that like they told me more about their past than they ever told anyone. Again, while we were still dating. And they just loved me so much, but they had to be careful. And I was like, why would you be careful telling me things? He's like, yeah, I don't tell anyone I have kids. I was like, why would you not? He's like, well, because then people start asking questions. And I was like, ugh. And again, I start realizing, and he's like, he's acting like, well, I told you. I'm like, shh. Like, no, what you told me doesn't line up with what you're saying, sir. Like, what? Um, I just like, I don't know. And he was on Bumble, only Bumble, because he said that Bumble, women have to message first. So he can't be in trouble for anything. I was like, okay, like I should have known. I should have known. And to be completely honest, sharing this now, even this was over 2 years ago, their most recent book was published very recently. And they recount events very differently. Very differently, and have a whole different spin on all kinds of things. Their violence shows through in their stuff, and they say, well, I'm just mad at the world, and this is what um I am a little bit scared of posting this. So if anything happens to me, Jack did it. Scottsdale police will know what that is. Just go to Scottsdale police and then say that I did this, whatever. Yeah, just if anything happens to me, Jack did it. Just saying. But that being said, the charm, and the just blatant lies and the mask, the wanting to rush things, the love bombing, the obsession with you, and again, I want to say that those feelings were real. I do. At least how he felt about me, I just feel like you can't fake when you're that blackout drunk. You can't. And maybe to me, wanting that to exist makes it more human, and makes it feel like less of a threat towards me. I think that's why I want to believe that, as that's kind of it. And then the other thing is, if I was the one who missed the signs, if it was my fault that there was this relationship, then that means that it can't happen again. Because if I'm the one responsible for changing it, I can't be targeted again, right? But the reality is, I'm just a good person who has been through her stuff. This person saw that. This person knew how to weaponize that and said, wow, this is a really kind soul, and I can make someone be empathetic. That my angels were protecting me. I was guided. And I really think I was his karma. Then that year later, when, like I said, it was a whole divine intervention thing again, when I was waiting on the line to exit Costco with a cart between us, turned around, there he was with a mental health organization shirt. When I looked it up, it was a youth mental health organization in the area nearby. And again, I had to make the decision, am I going to say something? He didn't kill me last time, but man, he might this time. If I ruin his life twice, if he lost his job, he lost everything, and he rebuilt again, and he's making money again, and he's somehow living and surviving, and not only that, in mental health, which something he says he's passionate about, but he's tied to a 24-hour youth crisis facility. I just was so sick to my stomach. I had to say something. And the police told me they couldn't do anything until he did anything. Because if he disclosed to his employer and they hired him, there's nothing the police can do. All they can do is make sure he's registered. And they checked and they said he is at that point after he got in trouble for not registering. And so I went to the company and I gave them this information, and I talked to just, someone on the phone, and I was shaking and my voice was shaking, and I was like, I don't know what to do. It's the information that I have. I ended up sending an email. I said, please don't let him know it's me. But again, he saw me. He knows it's me. He knows that. And like, I have a protected address. I whatever, but he's a tech guy. I don't put anything past tech guys. I'm pretty sure he could find me if he wanted to. But anyways, it was a really hard lesson. And I haven't dated since. And I am dating now, over 2 years later. And I am listening to my intuition. I'm moving slow. I am not letting anyone love bomb me. I know what I'm looking for. I'm very intentional. And I'm coming into dating in a very grounded space instead of a triggered space. And I'm listening to my intuition in everything that I do. My life since then has rebuilt beautifully. I have reconnected with my family, the good parent side of the family. The other side, the primary abuser, bio dad, is dead to me, and I wish they were. However, they still exist to torment me on this earth. That aside, I'm in a really good place. I'm in a very good foundational space where I've built some strong foundations, and now it's time for me to rise, and it's time for me to expand. And there are some stories that I've been holding back for fear of what might happen if I say something. But I think the lessons that I learned and the experience that I have is not something that is isolated, and it is not something that I experienced alone. And just the little bit that I have shared on social media, the comments that I've gotten and the messages that I've received saying that, like, there's no way, like, this happened to me and thank you for saying this, or, there's no way you could have known, release that shame, all of that. Like, I recognize that, and that cognitive dissonance of the person I saw after compared to the person I was with being the same person is terrifying, let alone the person that was described on paper. It's terrifying, but he's so smart. He's really smart. He's really charming, and he looks just like a normal guy. And when that happens, the privilege in this country, and he got away with a lot of things. He's at least registered now. I don't know if he's using the right birthday. I don't know how he's doing things. Like I said, there were 2 separate birthdays that were listed. One was the one he gave me. One was my birthday. So I can assume that the one on the sex offender registration would be the one that is correct, not something on a not official document, right? So either way, those Pisces men, 1, they are my karma. They're the death of me. 2, they are the most emotionally manipulative, serial killer-esque personalities if they are unhealed. They have very strong tendencies to be that. Very strong. And that's just terrifying. That's terrifying. I have seen, not to this level, but I have dealt with men who are similar, who have very similar, actually, astrological placements, who have that ability to detach and manipulate and lie like it's easy. And you don't pick up on it until you start noticing the little holes. They're good. They're charming. As these predators are not only, one comment was like, don't forget they don't only groom you, they groom the community first. And that's very clear. That's very clear. They try and make their reputation be as happy and positive and being the good guy in the room and the charismatic and let me help you, opening the door for the elderly and like all of that stuff. Like it's just, it's a show. It's a mask. And not everyone who is a good person, who is doing good deeds, who is charming and expressive and all of these things, like in therapy, not all of these people are predators. That's the hard thing, is like it's just the tiny cracks in the mask, but they can't keep it up forever. And I figured it out in about a couple months. It was a summer thing. It was done by the end of summer. And I was grieving and I was doing all the things. And so, I'm very proud of myself for how I handled it. I even, like, even though I didn't know, I set boundaries. I noticed the love bombing. I was like, hey, let's slow down here. Hey, whatever. I was like, you're not going to treat me this way. Like, I still spoke up for myself. I still advocated for myself. Even though I didn't know what he was hiding, I knew how he was treating me was not okay. And so I'm really freaking proud of myself. And I do think like what I saw in myself and who I was able to be was a reflection of who I'm capable of being in a relationship. Um, my inner child being out is not a reflection of what he brought out in me. It's how I have the connection to myself, how I have the ability to love. It wasn't him. He was just a mirror of how I can love myself. And that helps me move forward in ways that is really healing and really supportive. And I feel better. And I don't know what's going to happen with me. I don't know who my person is. And I hope that this man never contacts me again or writes about me or anything. And if he does, it's going to be a skewed perception. But I just, it's a hard one to sit with. But the eyes, the lies, the cracks in the mask, the actions not always matching the words, the lack of follow through, the little holes in their story. Trust it. Just seeing a couple of those things, it makes sense why people don't leave. It makes sense why people don't look too much into it, because little human things you can just overlook. And on top of that, you are being groomed to believe something. You are being so showered and psychologically manipulated that it's hard to be yourself and think like yourself. I'm a very strong, resilient woman. I am someone who has been through a lot since my early childhood. I have been victim of psychological abuse my entire life, into my childhood through my adulthood. I would say my child life, not my entire life, but I know what that is. And I think for me, it was very different in that I was the victim of the abuse. I wasn't an accessory in someone's environment. I wasn't the target of the abuse. I was just someone they had around. I was like a toy for them. I was something that made them feel better about their pathetic lives. I was a distraction. I was a solution to their loneliness. And they got very vulnerable with me. And because they slipped up, karma took over. And that karma is me. As Taylor Swift would say, karma is not my boyfriend. Karma is my boyfriend? No. I was karma to my boyfriend. Oops. And like I say this very strongly, but also I am honestly, I'm scared. I'm scared about this coming out. I'm ready. I am divinely protected. I am protected physically. But I am very nervous about sharing this, because what I saw afterwards is someone who is very vindictive, very smart, has tools and resources. They also mentioned that when they were behind bars that they knew people who could just get rid of people if they were a problem. That the connections that they made when they were in jail, anyone could take care of them. Again, if anything happens to me, Jack did it. Scottsdale, Arizona, police department, Jack did it. They will know. They will know what that means. If you know my name, they will know what that means. If If it's not my bio dad who comes after me, it might be this guy. If it's not this guy, I got another one that might be slow too. You know, when you're a cycle breaker and you confront yourself with very scary people, it gets to be super scary. I'm not going to lie. Like, I preach about overcoming silence and you know, living loudly and healing loudly and all these things, but there's a time and a place. And one thing I was talking to my therapist about, and I was just like, you know, I was in fawn mode for a lot of this, and she was like, there are times where I have to teach teenagers how to just survive and how to appease their abusive parents so they can live and just get to 18 and then have autonomy over themselves. There were multiple instances where I didn't have autonomy. I didn't have a place to go. I was stuck in a car. I was in a place where I couldn't leave, where the keys weren't there, so I couldn't get out, which, red flag. If you need a key to exit a place, run. If you don't have access to exit yourself, don't go in there. Again, I wasn't thinking, I wasn't like, it just, but at the same time, I know that me sharing this is taking control of the narrative. It is releasing the shame, and it is hopefully helping other people who have been victim of this type of abuse or relationship with someone who is not someone they said they were. I hope that this helps people. And like I said, I have this pit in my stomach right now, and I am scared. However, I know that it is a very important story to share. And they're telling their own version of their life. I get to tell what happened with them and mine. Except for mine actually has the truth behind it and the proof behind it, but what have you. Anyways, so I appreciate everyone, again, who has reached out about this. And my hope is that we all learn to give ourselves some grace. And some people are just master manipulators and liars, and we can talk about it. We can talk about all the signs. We can talk about all of these things. And there's just sometimes something about when you're in it, it's a really hard spot. And, you know, I would hope that nothing like this ever happens to me again. I would hope that nothing like this ever happens to you. But I do want you to know that to trust your gut, and the tiniest little thing that feels off, regardless of if you understand it, trust it. Because the thing that got me out of the relationship was the thing that felt off with the drinking. And what was revealed afterwards was that they were a hidden child sexual predator. So, and I don't know how I would have been able to manage that information had I still been in a relationship with them. I don't know if I found out when I was still with them that I would have been okay. I don't know. I don't know. But I think that I found out in the safest way possible. I think that I was removed from the situation in the safest way possible. I think that it happened the best that it could to keep me as safe as possible. And I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. And what this has shown me is that I am somehow protected from some all-powerful source or something, or my angels or something's got my back. And that these stories are important. And this is something that I never thought would happen to me, especially considering my past and my history and all I've learned. But it did. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And I just want everyone to be safe out there. And if someone doesn't come up at all in a background check, maybe ask them to show you themselves. Like get actually like physically get all the things from them. And pay attention to love bombing. Romance is a real thing. Romance is a real thing. There are people I do believe you can fall in love with someone pretty early on. But you do not have to be completely swept off your feet and lose sense of self and rush and all of those things. Like, just pay attention to those signs, because that's how they get you. And unfortunately, people who have trauma histories are more vulnerable to being abused again, being manipulated. A predator sees prey. A wounded animal, prey. Be careful out there. Sending you love. And thank you so much for everything. As always, feel free to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the things. SOS with Dr. Taelor, Taelor. And much more to come. I will take a poll on the next one, what you think the next thing should be shared. Talk about no contact with reconciling after no contact with like half my family. And then the chronic illness journey, and there's some other things that we can get into as well. But we're just going to kind of go one by one over this whirlwind of past couple of years, but especially what this brought me. And we will circle back to this story as I move forward and share what this woke up in me, because this set me on a whole other level of journey and healing journey in this experience. So again, thank you for listening, sending you so much love. Here's to your own overcoming journey, giving ourselves grace, and just doing the best we can in healing and moving forward. Bye, everyone.